The shuttle broke through the clouds of Varax Prime, and Ambassador Kira Vasquez pressed her face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below her stretched a world of dark forests and jagged mountains, with cities built from black stone that seemed to grow out of the earth itself. The Varax had ruled this sector of space for 10,000 years, and every inch of their homeworld showed that Kira had spent 3 months preparing for this mission, reading every report, studying every cultural document that humanity had managed to gather about the Dominion. The Varax were predators in the truest sense of the word. They stood 8 feet tall on average, with 4 muscular arms and bodies covered in scales that shone like polished obsidian. Their faces were nightmare fuel for most species, with elongated snouts full of curved fangs and eyes that glowed like molten gold. They had conquered 32 species before they even developed faster than light travel, simply by being the most dangerous things on any planet they touched, and now humanity wanted to be their friend. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad made of some material that absorbed all sound, and Kira felt the strange silence press against her ears as the ramp lowered. Standing before her was a delegation of Varax warriors, each one armed with ceremonial blades that could cut through starship hull plating. At their head stood High Predator Thaxus himself, the ruler of the entire Dominion. He was enormous, even by Varax standards, standing nearly 9 feet tall with scars crossing his scales that spoke of countless battles. His 4 arms were folded across his chest, and his golden eyes studied Kira with the lazy interest of a lion watching a mouse. Kira walked down the ramp with her head held high and her steps confident. She had been warned that the Varax respected strength above all else, and showing fear was the fastest way to be dismissed as prey. Behind her, her small diplomatic team followed, their faces carefully neutral. Despite the terror they must have felt, the Varax guards shifted, their nostrils flaring as they caught the scent of human anxiety. Kira could almost hear their thoughts, could almost see them categorizing her species as weak, as prey, as nothing worth respecting. She smiled anyway. High Predator Thaxus took a step forward, his massive form blocking out the pale sun of Varax Prime when he spoke. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, translated by the device in Kira's ear. "So," he said, "these are the humans we have heard so much about." He circled her slowly, his 4 arms now hanging at his sides, each hand flexing claws that could disembowel a creature with a single swipe. "Soft," he observed. "No claws, no fangs, no armor. I confess I do not understand how your species survived long enough to build starships." Kira kept her smile in place. "We are full of surprises, High Predator." Thaxus made a sound that might have been laughter, a deep rumbling that vibrated through the landing pad. "Come," he said. "We shall see if you survive the Hall of Trophies. Many delegations do not." He turned and walked toward the massive palace that loomed over the landing field, and Kira followed without hesitation. The Hall of Trophies was exactly what its name suggested. It was a corridor that seemed to stretch forever, lined on both sides with the skulls of conquered species. Each skull sat on a pedestal of black stone, with a small plaque beneath it describing the species, their world, and how they had fallen to the Varax. Some skulls were tiny, no larger than a human fist. Others were massive, requiring pedestals the size of small buildings. All of them stared with empty eye sockets at anyone who passed, a silent warning about what happened to those who opposed the Dominion. Kira walked through the hall without flinching, though she felt the weight of all those dead civilizations pressing down on her behind her. She could hear one of her assistants breathing too fast, could sense the fear radiating from her team. The Varax guards watched them with hungry eyes, waiting for someone to break, to run, to prove that humans were just like all the other soft species they had crushed. When they reached the end of the hall, Thaxus turned to face them. "Most species weep when they see our trophies," he said. "Some beg for mercy, some try to flee. You did none of these things. Should I have? Kira asked. The High Predator studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable. Perhaps you are simply too stupid to understand the threat, he said finally. Or perhaps there is more to your species than meets the eye. We shall see. The ceremonial feast that followed was an elaborate affair, with foods that Kira could not identify and drinks that her medical team had quietly warned her not to consume. She sat at a long table of polished black wood, surrounded by Varax nobles who watched her every move with predatory interest. Thaxus sat at the head of the table, his daughter Silith beside him. The young Varax was small by her species standards, barely reaching Kira's chest height. But she had the same golden eyes as her father and the same dangerous grace throughout the meal. Kira caught the cub, watching her with an expression that mixed curiosity with contempt. She had clearly been raised on stories of Varax supremacy, taught from birth that her species sat at the top of the galactic food chain, looking at a soft, clawless human must have been like looking at a particularly unimpressive insect. Kira smiled at her anyway, and the cub's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Your species is new to the galactic stage, Thaxus said, drawing Kira's attention back to him. You have much to learn about how things work in our sector of space. We are eager students, Kira replied. Good, Thaxus said. Tomorrow we will discuss the terms of your submission. The tribute your species will provide, the world you will surrender, the resources you will offer to the Dominion. Kira took a sip of water, the only thing at the table she was certain would not poison her. With respect, High Predator, humanity does not submit. We came here to negotiate a trade agreement between equals. The silence that followed was absolute. Every Varax in the room turned to stare at her, their golden eyes wide with shock. Somewhere behind her, Kira heard one of her assistants make a small sound. Of Thaxus leaned forward, his forehands gripping the edge of the table, hard enough to crack the ancient wood. Equals, he repeated, his voice dangerous and low. Equals, Kira confirmed, her smile never wavering. The High Predator stared at her for a long moment, and then he threw back his head and laughed. It was not a friendly sound. You have courage, little human, he said when he finally stopped. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. We shall see how long it lasts. Young Silith watched the exchange with growing fascination, her young mind working through what she had just witnessed. The prey creature had not submitted. The prey creature had smiled at her father and spoken of equality. This was wrong. This was not how the universe worked. She decided then that she would teach this human her place. She would show her father what a true predator could do. She would make the human afraid. It was only a matter of time. The negotiations began the next morning in a chamber designed to intimidate. The walls were carved with scenes of Varax conquest, showing their warriors tearing through armies of lesser species with savage efficiency. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow, and the only light came from torches that cast flickering shadows across everything. Kira sat at one end of a massive stone table, her diplomatic team arranged behind her. The other end sat High Predator Thaxus and his council of advisors, each one a scarred veteran of the Dominion's countless wars. The air smelled of blood and old violence, and Kira suspected that was entirely intentional. Let us begin, Thaxus said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. The Dominion requires tribute from all species that wish to operate within our territory. You will provide us with mineral resources from your outer colonies. You will surrender 3 habitable worlds for our expansion, and you will offer 100,000 of your people each cycle to serve in our labor forces. Kira listened to the demands with a calm expression, then leaned forward and folded her hands on the table. Counteroffer, she said. We provide nothing, surrender nothing, and offer nothing. Instead, we establish mutual trade routes that benefit both our peoples. We share technological advances. We build something together rather than one taking from the other. The Varax counselors hissed with outrage. Their scales bristling and their claws extending, one of them slammed all four fists on the table and snarled something in their native language that the translator rendered as several very creative threats. Thaxus silenced them with a gesture. You do not seem to understand your position, human, he said. We are not asking, we are telling. Your species is weak. You have no fleet capable of standing against ours. You have no warriors who could survive 5 seconds against our lowest soldiers. And yet here I am, Kira said, sitting at your table, speaking to you as an equal. Not running, not begging, not showing you my throat in submission. That is because you are foolish, Thaxus growled. Perhaps, Kira agreed. Or perhaps it is because I know something you do not. The High Predator's eyes narrowed. And what would that be? Kira smiled, that same calm smile she had worn since arriving on this world. That strength comes in many forms, she said. And the Varax have not yet learned all of them. The negotiations continued for hours, going in circles as the Varax demanded submission, and Kira offered partnership by midday. Frustration filled the chamber like smoke, and Thaxus called for a recess. Kira was shown to a set of guest quarters that were luxurious by Varax standards, but felt like a prison cell to her. The walls were solid stone. The windows were narrow slits designed for defense rather than light. And armed guards stood at every door. She spent an hour reviewing her notes and consulting with her team. But the confined space started to press against her. So she asked her guards if there was somewhere she could walk. They exchanged glances, clearly uncertain what to do with a guest who wanted to move around freely. Finally, one of them grunted and gestured for her to follow. He led her through winding corridors and up several flights of stairs until they emerged into a garden unlike anything Kira had expected to find. On this harsh world, plants with leaves of deep purple and crimson grew in carefully arranged patterns, their flowers releasing a sweet scent that cut through the metallic smell of the palace. A small stream wound through the space, its water dark but clear, and strange insects buzzed between the blossoms. Kira thanked her guide and stepped into the garden, letting the relative peace wash over her. The negotiations were not going well, but she had expected that the Varax respected only strength, and humanity would have to find a way to demonstrate theirs without starting a war they could not win. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the small figure crouched among the plants. Young Silith was practicing her hunting stances, moving through positions that her tutors had drilled into her since she could walk. Her small body flowed from one pose to the next with the liquid grace of her species, her claws extending and retracting, her fangs bared in silent snarls. She was pretending to hunt, Kira realized, imagining prey before her that she could chase and catch and kill. Then Silith looked up and saw the human watching her for a moment. Neither of them moved. Silith's golden eyes went wide, then narrowed with something that looked like calculation. Here was the creature that had insulted her father, the soft, weak thing that dared to speak of equality with the rulers of the Dominion. Here was prey that did not know its place. Silith had been raised on stories of Varax glory, tales of how her ancestors had conquered world after world through the sheer terror of their presence. She knew that her species had a weapon that few others could match, a biological gift that had served them since before they built their first tools. Varax growl was legendary throughout the sector. It was not just a sound but a vibration that hit frequencies designed to trigger fear responses in most carbon-based lifeforms. Prey species who heard it experienced immediate terror, their bodies flooding with chemicals that told them to run or freeze or submit. Even other predator species often found themselves paralyzed by that sound. Silith had been practicing her growl for years, and her tutors said she had real talent. Now she would prove it. The cub dropped into a threat posture, Her 4 small arms spread wide, her claws fully extended. Her scales bristling to make her look larger, she opened her mouth, revealing rows of fangs that were already impressive, despite her young age, and then she growled. The sound started low, almost below the range of human hearing. But Kira felt it immediately. It vibrated through her chest, through her bones, through the very core of her being. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee, to get away from the predator before it could strike. Her heart rate spiked and adrenaline flooded her system, her pupils dilated and her muscles tensed for flight. Scythe saw all of this and felt triumph surge through her. She was doing it. She was proving herself. She was showing this foolish prey creature what it meant to face a true Voraxini. Moment now the human would run or fall to her knees, or show her throat in submission. Any moment now Scythe would prove that she was worthy of her father's legacy. But the human did not run. The human did not fall to her knees. The human did not show her throat. Instead, the human did something that Scythe had never seen any creature do in response to a Vorax growl, something that made no sense at all. The human smiled, and then the human laughed. Scythe's growl faltered and died in her throat as she stared at the laughing human. This was wrong. This was completely and utterly wrong. The prey creature was supposed to be afraid, was supposed to run, was supposed to show submission. Instead, Ambassador Kira Vasquez was laughing with what sounded like genuine delight, her strange flat teeth showing in that expression humans called a smile. "Oh, sweetheart," Kira said, and her voice was warm and fond in a way that made no sense at all. That was adorable. Do it again. Adorable. The word hit Scythe like a physical blow. She was not adorable. She was terrifying. She was a predator. She was the daughter of High Predator Thaxis himself. She had spent years perfecting that growl, years learning to project the fear that had made her species masters of their corner of the galaxy. And this soft, clawless creature thought it was adorable. Scythe tried again, putting everything she had into the sound. Her growl deepened and intensified, hitting frequencies that should have reduced the human to a trembling mess. She spread her arms wider and extended her claws further, and bared every single one of her fangs. For a moment she thought it was working. She could see the human's body responding, could see the increased heart rate and the dilated pupils and all the signs of fear that she had been taught to recognize. But then Kira did something even more inexplicable. Then, laughing, she crouched down to Scythe's eye level, bringing herself within easy striking range of the cub's claws. And she reached out with one soft pink hand and ruffled the scales on top of Scythe's head. The touch was gentle and warm, and it sent a confusing cascade of sensations through Scythe's young nervous system. No one touched her like that. Not even her father. Physical contact among the Vorax was either combat or mating or the rough handling of prey. This was none of those things. This was something Scythe had no name for. "You are going to be so fierce when you are older," Kira said, a voice still warm with that strange fondness. "Your father must be so proud of you." Scythe's threat posture collapsed entirely. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her claws retracted, and her bristling scales smoothed down. She stood there staring at the human, with her mouth hanging open and her golden eyes wide with utter confusion. "You," she started, then stopped because she did not know what to say. "Yes, sweetie?" Kira asked, still crouched at eye level, still smiling that warm smile. "You were supposed to be afraid." Scythe finally managed. Kira tilted her head to one side in a gesture that looked almost playful. "Was I?" she asked. "I am sorry to disappoint you. Why are you not afraid?" Scythe demanded, her young voice cracking with frustration. "My growl is perfect. My tutors say so. It should make you run or submit or at least tremble." Kira seemed to consider the question seriously, which somehow made everything even more confusing. "Your growl is very impressive," she said finally. "You clearly have real talent, but I've heard growls before." "From what?" Silith asked, because she could not imagine what creature in the galaxy could match the terror of a Vorax. "From my dog when she was a puppy." Kira said Silith did not know what a dog was or what a puppy was, but she understood that she had somehow been compared to something small and young, and not at all frightening. The insult burned in her chest, but before she could respond, Kira sat down on the ground right there in the garden. She crossed her legs in a position that looked uncomfortable and patted the grass beside her. "Come sit with me," she said. "I will teach you a game from my world." "I do not play games with prey," Silith snarled, trying to recover some of her dignity. Kira said, "That is a shame. It is a fun game. My nieces and nephews love it." She began to clap her hands together in a rhythm, then slap her knees, and clap again, creating a pattern of sounds that was oddly pleasing to hear. Silith watched with reluctant fascination. "What are you doing?" she asked despite herself. "It is called a clapping game," Kira explained. "You match the pattern with a partner. It gets faster and faster until someone makes a mistake. The person who lasts longest wins." "That is a stupid game," Silith said. But she did not walk away. "Perhaps," Kira agreed, "but it is fun. And sometimes fun is more important than smart." She continued the pattern, her hands moving with surprising speed and precision. Silith found herself tracking the movements, her predator instincts analyzing the rhythm and looking for patterns before she quite knew what she was doing. She sat down across from the human. "Show me," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, softer and more curious than she had ever heard it. Kira's smile grew even warmer. "Put your hands up like this," she said, demonstrating. "Now we clap together. Then our own hands, then together again. Ready?" They started slowly. Silith's 4 hands initially confused by a game designed for creatures with only 2, but she adapted quickly, as the Vorax always did. And soon she was matching Kira's rhythm with 2 of her hands, while the other 2 rested on her knees. The game got faster. Silith felt something strange bubbling up in her chest as she struggled to keep up with the increasingly rapid pattern. When she finally missed a beat and their hands clapped out of sync, the feeling burst out of her throat as a sound she had never made before. She giggled. The sound shocked her so much that she slapped all 4 hands over her mouth and stared at Kira with horror. "What was that?" she whispered. "That was laughing," Kira said gently. "It means you are having fun." "Vorax do not have fun," Silith said. But she did not sound certain anymore. "Everyone has fun," Kira said. "Even predators, even the fiercest hunters in the galaxy. Fun is not weakness, sweetheart. It is just joy." Silith slowly lowered her hands from her mouth. "Can we play again?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain in a way that would have horrified her tutors. "Of course," Kira said. "As many times as you want." They were in the middle of their 5th round, Silith giggling freely now as she struggled to match an increasingly complex pattern. When the guards burst into the garden with weapons drawn behind them, came High Predator Thaxus himself, his golden eyes blazing with fury and fear. He had sensed his daughter's distress through the bond they shared, had felt her confusion and her strange new emotions, and he had come running with murder in his heart. But what he found when he entered the garden stopped him in his tracks. His daughter, the heir to the Dominion, the future High Predator of the Vorax, was sitting on the ground playing a hand game with the human ambassador, and she was laughing, actually. Laughing a sound he had never heard her make in all her young. Thaxus stared at the scene before him, and for the first time in his very long life, he had absolutely no idea what to do. The garden fell silent as High Predator Thaxus stood in the entrance with his guards arrayed behind His massive form seemed to fill the entire space, and his golden eyes burned with an intensity that would have sent most creatures fleeing in terror. But Ambassador Kira Vasquez simply looked up at him with that same calm expression she had worn since arriving on Varax Prime. "Hi, Predator," she said pleasantly. "Would you like to join us?" Thaxis's jaw tightened, and Silith scrambled to her feet with guilt written across her young features. "Father, I can explain," she started. But Thaxis silenced her with a gesture. "What have you done to my daughter?" he demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I taught her a clapping game," Kira replied, rising smoothly to her feet. "She has real talent for it." "She was laughing," Thaxis said, and the word came out like an accusation. "I have never heard her laugh, not once in all her years of life." "What trick did you use? What weapon? What technology?" "No trick," Kira said. "No weapon. Just a game and some kindness." "Kindness?" Thaxis repeated the word as if it were foreign to him. "Which perhaps it was." "Yes," Kira said. "We humans are quite fond of it." The High Predator took a step forward, his claws extending and his scales bristling. "You think you can manipulate my hair with soft words and foolish games?" he growled. "You think you can weaken the future of the Dominion with your prey tactics?" "I think I made a child laugh," Kira said, and her voice remained steady despite the enormous predator looming over her. "I think I showed her that not everything in the universe has to be about dominance and fear." "Is that really so terrible?" Thaxis opened his mouth to respond, but Silith stepped between them. "Father, please," she said. "She did not hurt me. She was kind to me." "No one has ever been kind to me like that." The words hit Thaxis harder than any physical blow could have. He looked down at his daughter, at this small, fierce creature he had raised to be a predator, and he saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Hope it unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. "Everyone out," he commanded. "Guards, leave us, Silith. Go to your quarters." "But father," Silith protested. "Now," Thaxis said, and his voice left no room for argument. The guards retreated quickly, clearly relieved to escape the tension, and Silith followed more slowly, casting glances back at Kira as she went when they were finally alone. Thaxis turned to face the human ambassador. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with eyes that had seen 1,000 battles and judged 1,000 foes. "You are not afraid of me," he said finally. And it was not a question. "No," Kira agreed. "Why not?" Thaxis demanded. "I could kill you with a single blow. I could tear you apart before your guards even knew you were dead. Every species in this sector fears the Varax. Why do you not?" Kira considered the question seriously before answering. "May I tell you a story?" she asked. Thaxis made a sound that might have been agreement. So Kira began to speak. "Humans evolved on a world called Earth," she said. "It was not a gentle place. Our planet was filled with predators far more dangerous than any species we have encountered in space. Creatures with fangs and claws and venom and strength that should have wiped us out 1,000 times over. And yet you survived." Thaxis said. "We did more than survive," Kira replied. "We conquered, not through being the strongest or the fastest or the deadliest. We were none of those things. We were soft and slow, and our claws were pathetic little fingernails." She held up her hands, showing him the blunt nails that the Varax found so amusing. "But we had something else," she continued. "We had patience. We had endurance. We had the ability to keep going long after other creatures would have given up. We did not chase our prey in short bursts of speed. We followed them, hour after hour, day after day, until they collapsed from exhaustion, and we walked up to them and killed them with rocks and sticks." Thaxis's eyes narrowed. "Persistence hunting," he said. "We have heard of it. A desperate strategy for weak creatures." "Desperate, perhaps," Kira agreed, "but effective. And that was not the most interesting part of our evolution. What was? Thaxis asked. Despite himself, Kira smiled that strange, warm smile of hers. We did not just hunt the predators of our world, she said. We tamed them. The word hung in the air between them. There was a creature on Earth called a wolf, Kira continued. They were pack hunters, smart and fierce and deadly. They should have been our enemies forever, but somewhere along the line, some human looked at a wolf and thought not threat but friend. And they were right. You befriended predators, Thaxis said, disbelief coloring his voice. We made them part of our families, Kira said. Wolves became dogs, and dogs became our companions. They slept in our homes and played with our children and protected us with their lives. We took one of the most dangerous creatures on our planet and turned them into something that would fetch sticks and roll over for belly rubs. Thaxis stared at her. And this is supposed to make me respect you. It is supposed to make you understand us, Kira replied. Humans do not look at predators and feel fear, or at least not only fear. We look at predators and we think friend, we think partner, we think family. She took a step toward him, closing the distance between them. Your daughter tried to frighten me with her growl, she said softly. But all I could think was how much she reminded me of my dog when she was a puppy. Fierce and proud and absolutely convinced she was terrifying. And I loved her for it. You loved a predator for trying to frighten you, Thaxis said. I found her courage charming, Kira corrected. I found her spirit admirable. I saw a child trying to prove herself. And I wanted to show her that not everything has to be a battle. Thaxis was quiet for a long moment. The other species we have encountered, he said finally. They all fear us. They run or they fight or they submit. But they always fear us first. We are not like other species, Kira said. No, Thaxis agreed slowly. You are not. He looked at her differently now. Not as prey or as an enemy, but as something he had no category for. The Varax have ruled through fear for 10,000 years, he said. It is the foundation of our empire, the source of our power. What you are suggesting would change everything. Change is not always bad, Kira said. It is not always good either, Thaxis countered. True, Kira acknowledged. But consider this, High Predator, in 10,000 years of rule through fear. Has any species ever looked at your daughter and simply wanted to make her laugh? Thaxis had no answer for that. He stood in the garden of his ancestors, surrounded by the symbols of Varax's conquest. And he thought about a human who looked at predators and saw friends. He thought about his daughter laughing for the first time in her life, and he wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to strength than fear. The days that followed the garden incident saw a strange shift in the atmosphere of Varax's prime High Predator. Thaxis ordered his archivists to gather every piece of information they could find about humanity. Not military assessments or threat analyses, but history and culture and the strange path this soft species had walked. From their cradle world to the stars. What? They found disturbed them deeply. Humans had not simply survived their death world. They had systematically conquered it in ways that made the Varax's conquests look almost gentle by comparison. Every apex predator that had threatened human survival was now either extinct or reduced to small populations carefully managed by human authorities. The great cats that had once hunted human ancestors were now kept in facilities called zoos, where human children pressed their faces against glass to watch them. The wolves that had terrorized human settlements for thousands of years now wore collars with little tags that had cute names on them, and it was not just predators. Humans had bent their entire world to their will, reshaping landscapes, redirecting rivers, changing the very climate of their planet. They had done all of this without claws or fangs or venom or any of the natural weapons that the Varax took for granted. They had done it with tools and patience and an absolute refusal to accept that they could not win one. Archivist came to Thaxis with a trembling voice and showed him records of something called World War II. They did this to each other, the archivist whispered. Not to prey species, not to rivals, to other humans. Millions dead in just a few years. Thaxis studied the records in silence, looking at images of human cities reduced to rubble and human bodies stacked like cordwood. And then what happened? He asked. They rebuilt, the archivist said. They made peace with their enemies. They created alliances with the very nations they had been trying to destroy. Within a generation, they were trading and traveling and treating each other like family. They forgave, Thaxis said. They moved on, the archivist corrected. They decided that holding on to hatred was less useful than building something new. They are practical that way. Thaxis dismissed the archivist and sat alone in his chambers for a long time. He thought about everything he had learned. About this species that looked so soft and weak but had clawed their way to dominance on a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over. He thought about the ambassador who had looked at his growling daughter and seen something cute, he thought. About the laughter he had heard in that garden, the first laughter his daughter had ever produced, and he made a decision the next morning. Thaxis summoned Ambassador Vasquez to the negotiation chambers. She arrived with her team behind her, her face showing no expectation of what was to come. I have been thinking about what you told me, Thaxis said without preamble. About your species and how you relate to predators. Yes, Kira said. I have also been studying your history, Thaxis continued. The wars you have fought, the enemies you have defeated, the predators you have tamed. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. The Varax have always believed that strength means being feared, he said. We built our empire on terror. We crushed species that opposed us and displayed their skulls as warnings. We thought this was the only way. It is one way, Kira agreed. But not the only one. No, Thaxis said. I am beginning to understand that. He stood and walked around the great table until he stood before her, looming over her small human form. You looked at my daughter, and you did not see a threat, he said. You saw a child. You saw potential. You saw something worth nurturing rather than fearing. I did, Kira confirmed. Why? Thaxis asked. Because that is who we are, Kira said simply. Humans see the universe and we think about what it could be. Not just what it is. We see predators and we think friends. We see enemies and we think future allies. We see fear and we think there must be something better. Thaxis was quiet for a long moment. The Dominion will not offer tribute terms, he said. Finally, Kira's team tensed behind her, preparing for the worst. Instead, Thaxis continued. We will accept your proposal of mutual trade and cooperation. We will be partners, not masters and servants. The silence that followed was profound. You are serious, Kira said. I am always serious, Thaxis replied. The Varax do not joke. We are very bad at it, actually. Something that might have been humor flickered in his golden eyes. But I'm also curious, he added. You spoke of your dog, the descendant of wolves that your ancestors tamed. I would like to see one of these creatures someday. That can be arranged, Kira said. And her smile was genuine now. I think you would like golden retrievers. They are very friendly. I do not know what that means. Thaxis admitted. You will. Kira promised. The treaty was signed 3 days later in a ceremony that would be studied by historians for generations. Varax Dominion and the Human Coalition entered into an alliance of equals. The first such agreement the Dominion had ever made. Trade routes were established. Cultural exchanges were planned, and for the first time in 10,000 years, species looked at the Varax and did not immediately think predator. They thought partner on the day of Kira's departure. Young Silith insisted on coming to the landing pad. She had spent every free moment of the past few days following the ambassador around. asking questions about Earth and dogs and clapping games and 1,000 other things. Now she stood beside her father as the human shuttle prepared to leave, her golden eyes bright with an emotion that was still new to her. "Will you come back?" she asked as Kira approached. "I will," Kira promised, kneeling down to meet the cub's eyes. "And next time I will bring pictures of my golden retriever. Her name is Bella, and she would love you, even though I growled at you," Silith asked. "Especially because you growled at me," Kira said with a warm smile. "That is when I knew we were going to be friends." She hugged the young Varax then, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just days before. Silith stiffened at first, unused to such contact. But then her 4 arms came up and wrapped around the human ambassador when Kira finally pulled away. She stood and nodded respectfully to High Predator Thaxus. "Thank you for your hospitality," she said. "I look forward to what our peoples will build together." "As do I," Thaxus replied. "Travel safely, Ambassador Vasquez." The shuttle lifted off and climbed toward the pale sky of Varax. Prima Thaxus and Silith watched until it disappeared into the clouds, then remained watching even after it was gone. "Father," Silith asked finally, "why are we not afraid of them?" It was a good question, and Thaxus considered it carefully before answering. Humans were soft and clawless and looked like prey, but they had conquered their death world through sheer stubbornness. They had tamed the predators that should have eaten them and turned enemies into friends. They had looked at a galaxy full of fangs and claws and said, "We can work with this." They were perhaps the most terrifying species the Varax had ever encountered, not because of what they could destroy, but because of what they could build. But they had chosen not to give the Varax reason for fear. They had chosen friendship instead. "Because, daughter," Thaxus said finally, "they've decided not to give us reason to be." Silith nodded slowly, accepting this answer. Then she reached up with one small hand and took her father's massive claw in her own. It was the first time she had ever done that. Thaxus looked down at his daughter, at this small, fierce creature who had learned to laugh and hug and reach for connection instead of always reaching for dominance. And he thought that perhaps the humans had already changed the Dominion more than any conquest ever could. Perhaps that was their true strength all along, not the ability to destroy, but the ability to transform, to look at predators and see friends, to look at enemies and see family, to look at a universe full of fear and choose to build something better. That was what it meant to be human, and maybe, just maybe, it was what the Varax could learn to be too.